Welcome everyone. It's Sunday, and that means time for your answers and a brand new question on our weekly show, Popular Polls. I'm Alex, your host, coming to you from Hamburg, where it's another rainy Sunday afternoon. Well, technically it's a rainy Sunday night, but anyway, let's get straight into the answers from last week's question. And I asked you, which form of transport is going electric next? Thanks to everyone who participated, we've got 8 answers, and 7 of them, yeah, you're hearing right, 7 of them saying ferries will go electric next, and 1 answer was there for small propeller aircraft. None whatsoever for those big cargo and cruise ships, for example. As I've discussed a little in the last episode, these make totally sense. You know, the small propeller aircraft as well as the bigger ferries, because ferries can juice up on either land side when they, take aboard new passengers or cars. And small propeller-based aircraft are used, mainly for recreational purposes and also for training new pilots. And those don't really need to stay up in the air all that long. There are already some propeller-based airplanes, the smaller ones, which can stay up in the air for, I think it's like 1.5 or 2 hours. So that's plenty long for someone who's learning to fly a plane or, for just recreational purposes. And it's so much cheaper to run them, so much less maintenance. But we're not going to get into all of that. It's a topic for another episode down the road. That being said, I still want to see those big boats, like the cargo and cruise ships, to go electric in the long run. That's what this world needs. And those ships, they do produce a lot of emissions, not only CO2 but also others, especially if they are running their engines in the harbors, which they sometimes have to do. And, harbors are along or oftentimes right along a city, so emissions, you don't want to technically have them there, but anyway, we don't really want to have any emissions at all. Okay, moving on to this week's question, and that's it's one that's a bit tougher to answer because I have a bias obviously to one side, and you'll see why. The topic: taxes. All right, so we talked about taxes before, carbon tax mainly, and carbon tax might be a good answer for this question, but hear me out. So roads need to be maintained, right? And in theory, at least, money from gas and diesel taxes and just a tax on a car itself is going towards that. I say in theory because sometimes funds are repurposed in the government, and anyway, but in theory, at least, this should pay for your infrastructure, especially the roads that we all basically use. And electric cars don't really generate any tax income from gas, as long as they're fully electric, obviously, sales. And they are, at least here in Germany, 10 years tax exempt from the regular car tax, which, by the way, is calculated on the emissions of your vehicle. So even when we have those taxes, they are pretty low. So my question to you is, should electric cars be taxed more? Or, taxed in general at all? To answer, click on the pop-up card, which will pop up in the top right-hand corner of your video screen right now. And here are your answer choices. We have 4 of them. Number 1, no. I don't want electric cars to be taxed at all. And, some of us, kind of on the fence on this one, but some of us may even say, like, yeah, I don't want my electric car to be taxed because obviously that's me paying more money and I don't want that. But if you do choose the answer choice of no, please leave a comment down in the comment section below to explain yourself, because I'd love to get some explanations on this one. And also for the other 3 answer choices, I'd love to get some insights from you, so feel free to always leave a comment down below. So the second option is yes, starting as soon as possible. So we should basically introduce those taxes on electric cars as soon as we can and change the legislation where it's currently otherwise in place to make that happen. Number 3, yes, once electric car sales outweigh ICE, so internal combustion engine car sales. Now, some people may argue that this is a long time away and we still need some money to generate to, get our roads and stuff going. Others might argue it's worth it to invest that long into electric cars, into our future, because this is going to save us much more in the long term, especially running in, kind of money-wise for healthcare. You know, a lot of people are getting sick because out of the negative impact that emissions, not only CO2, but, you know, in general, those emissions have on people, especially living in cities. So some might argue, no, this outweighs, and there's a lot of studies around this outweighs the taxes by a factor of a lot, right? And the last option number 4, is yes, once we fully transition to electric or at least sustainable transport in one way or the other, and this is going, you know, even more drastic than saying once we kind of have the tipping point of more ICE or less ICE cars being sold than electric cars. But, you know, you might argue that it's worth it for our next generations living on this earth and for our children. So, yeah, I mean, I think there's still a good case to be made for that point. I am, for one, very excited to see your answers to this question, as clearly a lot of you are in favor of electric cars in general. You know, I am, obviously, too. But I, for one, would love to see them keeping the taxes low, or at least the incentives high, as long as possible to help transition the move to a sustainable transport city. And to get sustainable transport moving in the really long term, obviously along the way, I want to have some taxes kind of reintroduced, or at least introduced, once we have more cars for low prices, and I think that will work out fine. You may not know this, but here in Europe, a lot of car manufacturers have kind of delayed, I would say delayed, they might argue that's when they start, anyway, have delayed their electric cars market entry towards 2020, because that's when we have some new emission rules going into place, and that's when they really need to offset a lot of the emissions from car sales. You know, it's all going to be based on car sales. So for every big SUV, basically you want to sell a electric car to offset that, and there's huge fines involved with that. Read up on this if you want to, but anyway, they kind of have deferred their electric cars to that point. So I'm hoping to see that going forward, 2020 and onwards, we'll see a lot of more, you know, electric cars come in, and we'll have some more competition, and then at some point can reintroduce, or at least introduce, some taxes again. Make sure to subscribe. Answers, as always, coming up in the next episode, which will be on next Sunday. And until then, I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.